There are moments on the road that stay with you forever. Not the endless miles of asphalt, not the sunsets that paint the sky in colors no artist could capture, not even the close calls with sleep-deprived drivers swerving into your lane. No, it's the people you meet, those brief intersections of lives that would never cross paths except for the strange magic of the highway. My name's Frank Miller, and I've been hauling freight across America for 32 years. But nothing in those 3 decades prepared me for what I found on that lonely stretch of Route 66 in the Arizona desert. It was late June, the kind of summer heat that makes the air shimmer above the pavement like you're driving through a dream. I was eastbound out of Kingman, hauling refrigerated produce to Albuquerque. My Peterbilt 389, Old Faithful, I call her, was humming along nicely, the AC blasting cold against the 102-degree heat outside. Route 66 through Arizona is something special. Not the interstate that everyone takes nowadays, but the real Mother Road. The 2-lane blacktop that winds through ghost towns and past faded motels with flickering neon signs. I prefer it to I-40 when I have the time. It's slower, sure, but there's a peace to it, a connection to something older and more honest than the faceless efficiency of the modern highways. I'd been driving since dawn, and the afternoon sun was hanging low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the desert. The radio was playing some old Johnny Cash tune, and I was tapping my fingers on the wheel, thinking about the small steakhouse in Seligman where I planned to stop for dinner. Their ribeye has been the same perfect medium rare for 20 years. That's when I saw it, a flash of white in the distance just off the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it might be a piece of trash caught in one of the scraggly desert bushes. Plastic bag maybe, dancing in the hot breeze. But as I got closer, the shape became more distinct, more purposeful somehow. I eased off the accelerator, squinting against the sun's glare. The white shape resolved itself into what looked like fabric, a lot of fabric, spread out against the red dirt and sage. My first thought was that someone had dumped an old mattress or some furniture, which happens too often on these back roads. But then I saw a movement, subtle but definitely there. I slowed Old Faithful down to a crawl, pulling onto the wide shoulder. Through my passenger window, about 50 yards off the road, I could now make out what appeared to be a person sitting on a large rock, a person in white. In my 3 decades on the road, I've stopped for plenty of stranded motorists. It's an unwritten code among long haulers. You help when you can, because someday it might be you sitting on the side of the road waiting for a kind stranger. But something about this felt different. There was no car that I could see, no obvious reason for someone to be sitting alone in the desert, miles from the nearest town. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the CB radio. Should I call it in? But what would I say? There's someone in white sitting on a rock in the desert? That wasn't exactly an emergency. Curiosity got the better of me. I put Old Faithful in park, set the brakes, and grabbed my hat from the passenger seat. The instant I opened the door, the heat hit me like a physical force, driving the air-conditioned chill from my skin in seconds. I settled my hat on my head, grabbed a bottle of water from my cooler, desert habit, and stepped down from the cab. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small against the vast emptiness. "You okay over there?" No response. The white shape didn't move. I started walking, my boots crunching on the gravel shoulder before transitioning to the softer sound of desert soil. As I got closer, the white shape began to take form, details emerging from the sun's glare. It was a woman, and she was wearing a wedding dress. The realization stopped me in my tracks. A bride out here? The nearest town was Seligman, at least 20 miles back, and there wasn't much there besides a few tourist stops and that steakhouse I was looking forward to. Certainly no wedding venues that I knew of. I approached more cautiously now, not wanting to startle her. She was sitting on a large, flat rock, her dress an elaborate thing with lace and beads that must have cost a fortune, pooled around her like spilled milk on the red desert floor. Her head was bowed, dark hair falling forward to hide her face. She hadn't acknowledged my presence, though she must have heard me by now. "Miss," I called, softer this time, stopping about 20 feet away. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of sobbing. Her shoulders were shaking, her hands pressed to her face. This was no peaceful desert meditation. This woman was in distress. I closed the distance, stopping a respectful few feet away. Up close, I could see that the pristine white dress wasn't so pristine anymore. The hem was dirty with red desert dust, and there was a tear along one side. Her dark hair had been styled elaborately with small white flowers woven through it, but much of it had come loose, falling around her shoulders in disarray. "Miss," I said gently, "I'm Frank. I'm a truck driver. My rig's just over there on the road. Are you hurt? Can I call someone for you?" Slowly, she raised her head. Her face was streaked with tears and mascara, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She was young, mid-20s maybe, and would have been beautiful if not for the utter devastation written across her features. She looked at me with an expression of such profound grief that it physically hurt to witness. For a long moment, she just stared as if trying to process my presence. Then she spoke, her voice hoarse from crying. "What time is it?" Of all the things she might have said, that wasn't what I was expecting. I glanced at my watch. Just past 5:30. She nodded slowly, then looked out across the desert. I was supposed to be married at 4. I didn't know what to say to that. In my years on the road, I'd encountered all sorts of situations. Accidents, breakdowns, lost tourists, but never a bride alone in the desert on what should have been her wedding day. "I'm sorry to hear that," I finally managed, offering her the water bottle. "Would you like some water? It's awful hot out here." She took the bottle with trembling hands but didn't open it, just held it in her lap like she wasn't sure what. It was 4. "Is there someone I can call for you?" I asked. "Family, friends, I hesitated, not wanting to say the word groom, in case that was the source of her distress. "No," she said quickly, almost panicked. "No calls, please." I nodded slowly, trying to assess the situation. She didn't appear physically injured, but sitting out in this heat, especially in that heavy dress, was dangerous. Dehydration and heat stroke were real risks. "My name's Frank Miller," I said, crouching down to be at eye level with her, but still keeping some distance. "I drive that big Peterbilt over there. I was heading to Seligman for dinner. Can I give you a ride somewhere?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if trying to decide whether I was a threat or salvation. I kept my expression open, non-threatening. At 53, with my gray-streaked beard and weathered face, I knew I looked more like someone's uncle than a danger. "I'm Eliza," she finally said. "Eliza Reyes. Or I was supposed to be Eliza Callahan today." Her voice broke on the last word, and fresh tears welled in her eyes. "It's nice to meet you, Eliza," I said gently, "though I wish it were under better circumstances." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah, me too. Can I ask how you got out here? I don't see a car." She gestured vaguely toward the east. "I walked." "Walked?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "From where?" "The Silver Sage Ranch. It's a wedding venue about 5 miles that way." She pointed east again. Or it was supposed to be my wedding venue. 5 miles in this heat, in a wedding dress. It was a miracle she hadn't collapsed. "That's a long way in those shoes," I said, nodding toward her white satin heels, now dusty and scuffed. "I took them off after the first mile," she said, and I noticed for the first time that her feet were bare and dirty. "I think I left them somewhere back there." She waved vaguely behind her. I nodded, trying to piece together what might have happened. A runaway bride was the obvious conclusion, but something about this felt different. The profound sadness in her eyes didn't match the stereotype of a woman who'd simply gotten cold feet. "Eliza," I said carefully, "I don't mean to pry, but are you in any kind of danger? Is someone looking for you that you're afraid of?" She shook her head. "No, not like that. Nobody's after me." She took a deep breath. "They're all still back there, probably still trying to figure out what to do. The guests, the wedding party, My fiancé. Her voice caught on the last word. I see, I said, though I didn't, not really. Well, you can't stay out here in this heat. How about we get you somewhere cool and you can figure out your next move? No pressure, no questions if you don't want them. She looked at me again, then out at the vast desert around us as if just realizing the precariousness of her situation. Okay, she said finally. But not Seligman. I can't risk running into anyone from the wedding. Fair enough, I said, standing and offering her my hand. We can head east instead. Ashfork's not too far. There's a decent motel there where you could rest, make some calls if you want to. She hesitated, then took my hand, letting me help her to her feet. The wedding dress was even more elaborate standing up. Layers of tulle and lace. That must have been stifling in this heat. She swayed slightly as she stood, and I steadied her with a hand on her elbow. When's the last time you had something to drink? I asked. Nodding at the still unopened water bottle in her hand, she looked down at it as if surprised to find it there. I don't remember. Go ahead and drink that. I've got more in the truck. She finally opened the bottle and drank deeply, finishing half of it in one go. Some color returned to her cheeks almost immediately. The walk back to the truck was slow. Her dress kept catching on desert scrub, and she was unsteady on her bare feet. I offered my arm for support, which she took gratefully. By the time we reached Old Faithful, she was breathing hard from the exertion. I helped her up into the passenger seat, which was no small feat with all that fabric. The dress filled the entire seat and then some, layers of tulle spilling onto the floor. I cranked up the AC before walking around to the driver's side. Once behind the wheel, I handed her another bottle of water from my cooler. Small sips, this time, I advised. Too much too fast can make you sick if you're dehydrated. She nodded, taking measured drinks as instructed. Some of the immediate distress had faded from her face, replaced by a hollow, distant look that was almost worse. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rumble of Old Faithful's idle and the blast of the air conditioning. I didn't start driving right away, sensing she might need a moment to collect herself. Thank you, she said finally, her voice small, for stopping. Most people wouldn't. Most truck drivers would, I corrected gently. It's kind of an unwritten rule of the road. We look out for each other and for folks who might need a hand. She nodded, staring out the windshield at the desert stretching before us. I don't know what I was thinking, she said after a moment. Walking out there like that, I had to get away. I couldn't breathe. I nodded, not pushing. If she wanted to talk, she would. If not, that was her business. You must think I'm crazy, she continued, glancing at me sideways. The runaway bride, just like in the movies. I don't think you're crazy, I said honestly. I think you're going through something difficult, and I'm not one to judge without knowing the story. And you don't owe me that story, by the way. She was quiet for another long moment, sipping her water and staring out at the desert. When she spoke again, her voice had a different quality, harder, more resolved. I found out he was cheating on me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with pain. I nodded slowly, letting her take her time. This morning? I asked gently. She gave a bitter laugh. No. That would have been better, I think. Cleaner. She took another sip of water. I found out 3 weeks ago. That surprised me. 3 weeks ago? But you still went through with the wedding preparations? She nodded, tears welling in her eyes again. Stupid, right? Everyone had already flown in. My parents had spent so much money. The venue was paid, for non-refundable. And he swore it was over, that it was a mistake, that he loved me more than anything. Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't say anything, just let her talk. Sometimes that's all people need. Someone to listen without judgment. I wanted to believe him, she continued. I really did. We've been together since college. 6 years. I thought I knew him. She shook her head. My friends told me to call it off, but I kept thinking about all the people who would be disappointed, all the money wasted. So I convinced myself I could get past it. She turned the water bottle in her hands, watching the condensation run down the sides. Then this morning, I was getting ready with my bridesmaids. Everyone was so excited, popping champagne, doing hair and makeup. My phone was charging across the room and it kept buzzing with notifications. My maid of honor brought it over, thinking it might be my mom or the coordinator. She paused, taking a shaky breath. It was her, the woman he'd been with, sending screenshots of their conversations from last night. He'd told her he was having a work event this weekend, that he'd see her Monday. She found out it was actually our wedding and decided I deserved to know he was still lying. Jesus, I muttered, unable to help myself. I'm sorry, Eliza. She nodded, acknowledging my sympathy with a small gesture. The worst part is I still almost went through with it. Can you believe that? I was standing there in this dress. She gestured at the elaborate gown, staring at those messages, and I was thinking about how I could just pretend I never saw them. Walk down the aisle, say my vows, go on our honeymoon to Bali next week. She looked out the window again, her profile sharp against the desert backdrop. I made it all the way to the back of the church. My dad was there waiting to walk me down the aisle. The music had started. And then I just couldn't. I couldn't take another step. I told my dad I needed a minute, went out the side door, and just started walking. 5 miles in the desert heat, I said softly. That's quite a walk. I wasn't thinking clearly, she admitted. I just needed to get away, to breathe. The dress was so tight, and everyone was watching, waiting. I felt like I was drowning. She looked down at the now dirty gown. I probably ruined it. Some things are meant to be ruined, I said quietly. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in her expression shifted. Yeah, she said. I guess they are. I started the truck then, putting it in gear. Ash Fork? I confirmed. She nodded. Ash Fork. As we pulled back onto Route 66 heading east, I could feel her watching me. After a few miles of silence, she spoke again. What about you, Frank? You married? It was a fair question given what she'd just shared. I was, I said. For 27 years. She passed away 4 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry, she said, and I could tell she meant it. Thank you. Margaret was a good woman, patient. Had to be, married to a long-haul trucker, raised our son mostly on her own while I was on the road. Do you regret it? She asked, being away so much. I considered the question, watching the road stretch out before us. Yes and no. I provided for them, gave them a good life. But I missed a lot. My boys' baseball games, school plays, everyday moments you can't get back. I adjusted my grip on the wheel. After Margaret got sick, I took local routes so I could be home every night. Should have done that years earlier. Your son, she said. Are you close now? A complicated question. We're working on it, I said finally. He's in Seattle, works in tech. We talk every Sunday. He's got 2 kids of his own now, my grandkids. I see them a few times a year. That's nice, she said, though I could tell her mind was still on her own situation. We drove in companionable silence for a while, the desert sliding by outside our windows, the sun sinking lower toward the horizon. The light was turning golden, painting the red rocks and scrubby vegetation in warm hues that made everything look softer, more forgiving. Can I ask you something, Frank? She said eventually. Sure. Do you think I did the right thing, walking away? I considered my answer carefully. This wasn't just idle conversation. She was genuinely asking for my perspective. I think, I said slowly, that marriage is hard enough when you start with trust. Without it, I shook my head. I was faithful to Margaret every day of our marriage, even with all those nights alone on the road. Not because I'm some saint, but because I made a promise, and a man's word has to mean something, or what's the point of anything? She nodded, absorbing this. The way I see it, I continued, You didn't just walk away from him, you walked toward something else. Self-respect, maybe. A future where you don't have to wonder every time his phone buzzes. A tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. That's a nice way to think about it. It's the truth, I said simply. As we approached Ash Fork, the sun was setting in earnest, the sky a riot of orange and pink. I pulled into the parking lot of the Pinecone Inn, a modest but clean motel I'd stayed at a few times over the years. Let me get you a room, I offered. You can rest, figure out your next move. She started to protest, but I held up a hand. Consider it a wedding gift that's being repurposed. That earned a small smile, the first I'd seen from her. Thank you, Frank, for everything. I went into the office and got her a room, paying cash. When I returned with the key, she was still sitting in my truck, staring at her phone, which was now lit up with notifications. 37 missed calls, she said, not looking up. 11 voicemails, 64 text messages. She turned the phone off and slipped it into a hidden pocket in her dress. I'm not ready to deal with any of that yet. You don't have to, I assured her. One step at a time. I helped her down from the truck, which was even more challenging than getting her in had been. The elaborate dress caught on everything, and by the time her feet touched the ground, she was laughing despite herself at the absurdity of it all. I should have eloped in jeans, she said, gathering armfuls of tulle and lace. Hindsight's always 20/20, I replied with a smile. I walked her to room 14, unlocked the door and did a quick check inside. Old habit from years of making sure Margaret was safe in hotel rooms when she occasionally joined me on the road. The room was basic but clean. Queen bed, dresser with a TV, small table with 2 chairs by the window, bathroom with a tub-shower combo. It's not the honeymoon suite in Bali, I said, but it'll do for tonight. It's perfect, she said, and I could tell she meant it. After the emotional wringer she'd been through, a quiet, anonymous room probably seemed like paradise. I set the key on the dresser. There's a diner next door that makes a decent breakfast. Office opens at 7 if you need anything before then. She nodded, then surprised me by stepping forward and giving me a quick hug. Thank you, Frank. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped. I patted her back awkwardly, not used to such displays. You'd have figured something out. You seem like a resourceful woman. She stepped back, wiping away a fresh tear. Not sure about that, but I'm learning. I headed for the door, then paused. Do you have any money for food or whatever you might need? She looked startled, as if the practical aspects of her situation were just now occurring to her. I have my phone and ID in this pocket, she said, patting her dress. But my purse, credit cards, everything else is back at the venue. I pulled out my wallet and handed her $100. This should tide you over until you can sort things out. She started to protest, but I shook my head. Pay it forward someday when you see someone else who needs help. She took the money with a nod. I will, I promise. Get some rest, I said. Things have a way of looking different in the morning. Back in my truck, I sat for a moment, thinking about Eliza and the strange twist of fate that had put her in my path. I'd been driving this route for decades, past this exact spot hundreds of times. If I'd been 5 minutes earlier or later, if she'd walked in a different direction, if the weather had been cloudy instead of clear, we never would have crossed paths. I thought about calling my son, suddenly wanting to hear his voice, but it was too late in Seattle. Tomorrow, I decided. I'd call him tomorrow. Instead, I drove to the truck stop on the edge of town, parked Old Faithful for the night, and had a quiet dinner at the counter. All the while, I kept thinking about Eliza in that motel room, surrounded by yards of white satin and tulle, trying to figure out what came next. Sleep came fitfully that night in the sleeper cab of my truck. I kept dreaming of Margaret, young again, in her simple white dress on our wedding day. In the dream, she was trying to tell me something important, but I couldn't hear her over the sound of the highway. I woke before dawn, as I usually do, and went through my morning routine. Wash up in the truck stop facilities, grab coffee and a breakfast sandwich, check the rig for the day's drive. By 6:30, I was ready to roll, but something made me drive. Back to the Pinecone Inn. I wasn't planning to disturb Eliza. She needed her rest, and it wasn't my place to intrude further on her life. But I wanted to leave a note with my phone number, in case she needed anything else. I'd grown oddly protective of this stranger in the short time I'd known her. As I pulled into the motel parking lot, I was surprised to see her sitting on the bench outside her room. She'd changed out of the wedding dress into a Pinecone Inn t-shirt and sweatpants, probably purchased from the small selection of necessities they sold in the office. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face scrubbed clean. Of makeup, she looked younger and somehow both more vulnerable and stronger than she had yesterday. She waved when she saw my truck, and I pulled into a spot near her room. "You're up early," I said as I approached. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much going through my mind." I nodded, understanding completely. "Have you had breakfast?" "Not yet. I was just sitting here watching the sunrise, trying to figure out what to do next." "Any conclusions?" She took a deep breath. "A few. I called my sister last night after you left. She was the only one I could face talking to. She's driving out from Flagstaff to pick me up this morning." "That's good," I said, genuinely relieved she had someone coming for her. Family is important at times like this. "She was the one who told me to call it off 3 weeks ago," Eliza said with a rueful smile. "She never liked him much, said he had shifty eyes. Turns out she was right." "Sisters often are," I said, thinking of my own sister who had warned me about spending too much time on the road and not enough with my family. Another person who had been right. "I also called the wedding coordinator," she continued. "Asked her to tell everyone I'm safe, but that the wedding is definitely off. She'll handle letting the guests know." She looked down at her hands. "I still need to talk to Jason. My ex-fiancé, I guess. But I'm not ready for that conversation yet." "One step at a time," I reminded her. She nodded, then looked up at me with clearer eyes than I'd seen yesterday. "I keep thinking about what you said, about walking towards something, not just away from something. It helped, more than you know." "I'm glad. I've been with Jason since I was 22, she said. "I don't really know who I am without him." "That's not healthy, is it?" "Doesn't sound like it," I agreed. "My sister suggested I come stay with her for a while. She lives alone, has a spare room. I could take some time to figure things out." She smiled slightly. "I'm a graphic designer. I can work from anywhere with an internet connection." "Sounds like a good plan," I said. "Flagstaff's a nice town." She nodded, then looked at me curiously. "What about you, Frank? Where are you headed today?" "Albuquerque," I said. "Delivering this load of produce, then picking up electronics heading back to California." "Always on the move," she observed. "It's what I know," I said simply. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the rising sun painted the distant mountains in shades of pink and gold. There was something peaceful about sharing this moment with a stranger who, through an accident of timing, had briefly become something more. "Can I buy you breakfast before your sister arrives?" I offered. "That diner I mentioned makes a mean stack of pancakes." She smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. "I'd like that." Over breakfast, she told me more about herself, how she'd grown up in Phoenix, studied design in college, met Jason at a friend's party their senior year. I shared stories from my years on the road, the strange and wonderful things I'd seen, the people I'd met. We carefully avoided the topic of her almost wedding and my late wife, as if by unspoken agreement keeping our conversation in lighter territory. As we were finishing our coffee, her phone buzzed with a text. "My sister," she said after checking it. "She's about 20 minutes away." I nodded, signaling for the check. I should get back on the road anyway. Got a schedule to keep. Outside the diner, standing in the already warming morning air, she turned to face me. "I don't know how to thank you, Frank. Not just for the ride or the room or breakfast." She gestured vaguely. "For everything." "No thanks needed," I assured her. "Like I said, it's the code of the road. We help when we can." "Well, I'm grateful, all the same." She hesitated, then asked, Would it be okay if I sent you a postcard sometime? Let you know how things turned out? The request surprised me, but I found myself nodding. I'd like that. I wrote down my mailing address at the dispatch office where I picked up my mail. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Frank, there's something I didn't tell you yesterday, about why I finally couldn't go through with the wedding. I turned back, waiting. It wasn't just the cheating, though that was bad enough. She took a deep breath. When I was standing there at the back of the church, I realized something. If I married him knowing what I knew, I'd be betraying myself worse than he ever betrayed me. Her words hit me with unexpected force. That's a profound realization, I said quietly. She nodded. It took me walking 5 miles in the desert, in a wedding dress to figure it out, but better late than never, right? Much better, I agreed. We said our goodbyes then, with promises that she'd let me know how she was doing. I watched her walk back toward the motel, her borrowed sweatpants and t-shirt a far cry from the elaborate wedding gown of yesterday. But somehow she looked more herself, whoever that self might turn out to be. Back on the road, with Old Faithful humming beneath me and the desert stretching out ahead, I found myself thinking about choices. The ones we make, the ones we avoid, and the ones that are made for us. I thought about Margaret, about my son in Seattle, about the years I'd spent on these highways while life happened elsewhere. And I thought about Eliza, standing at the back of that church, finding the courage to walk away from what everyone expected her to do, even as it broke her heart. 3 months later, a postcard arrived at my dispatch office. The front showed a sunset view of the San Francisco peaks near Flagstaff. On the back, in neat handwriting, "Dear Frank, I'm doing well. Staying with my sister turned into a permanent move. I've started my own design business and adopted a rescue dog named Highway. Seemed fitting. Some days are still hard, but I've never regretted my decision. Thank you for being there on the hardest day. You were right. I was walking towards something better. Hope the road is treating you kindly. Eliza." I kept that postcard tucked in the visor of my truck, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is change direction when the road we're on isn't taking us where we need to go. 6 months after that first postcard, another one arrived, this time from Portland, Oregon. Eliza had moved again, following a job opportunity. She'd met someone new, not romantically, she clarified, but a mentor who was helping her grow her business. She sounded happy, purposeful. A year to the day after I found her sitting on that rock in the Arizona desert, I received a small package instead of a postcard. Inside was a framed photograph of Eliza with a large, shaggy dog I assumed was Highway, standing on a beach with mountains in the background. She was smiling, really smiling, in a way I hadn't seen during our brief acquaintance. Also in the package was a handwritten letter. "Dear Frank, it's been exactly 1 year since you found me on what should have been my wedding day. I've thought about our conversation many times since then, about walking towards something, not just away from something. I wanted you to know what I've been walking toward. I've built a life I never would have had the courage to pursue if I'd gone through with that wedding. My business is thriving. I've reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I've even started dating again, cautiously. But most importantly, I've learned to trust myself, to believe that I deserve honesty, respect, and love, both from others and from myself. None of this would have happened if you hadn't stopped on Route 66 that day, if you hadn't shown kindness to a stranger in a dirty wedding dress, if you hadn't shared your wisdom about promises and self-respect. You changed the course of my life with that simple act of decency, and I will be forever grateful. I hope this finds you well, and that you're finding your own path toward happiness. With deepest gratitude, Eliza." I read that letter several times sitting in the cab of my truck at a rest stop in New Mexico. Then I did something I'd been considering for months. I called my dispatcher and told him I was ready for a change, that I wanted local routes only from now on, routes that would get me home every night. Then I called my son in Seattle and told him I was thinking about moving closer, to be near him and my grandkids. There was a long pause on the line. Before he said, "That would be great, Dad, really great." 2 months later, I made my last long-haul run. A coast-to-coast trip from California to New York and back. A sort of farewell tour of the highways that had been my home for over 3 decades. On my way back west, I deliberately routed myself along Route 66 through Arizona. I slowed as I passed the spot where I'd seen that flash of white in the desert a year and a half earlier. It looked different in the winter light, the scrubby vegetation more muted, the red earth darker. But I could still picture her sitting there, a lost bride on the side of the road, at the moment when her life changed direction. Mine had changed. That day too, though it took me longer to recognize it. Sometimes we're so focused on the road ahead that we don't notice when we've already arrived at a crossroads. I settled in Tacoma, close enough to Seattle to see my son and grandkids regularly, but far enough away to give us all some space. I took a job training new drivers for a local delivery company. Shorter routes, home every night, weekends off. It was an adjustment after so many years of solitude and endless highways, but a good one. On my office wall, I hung Eliza's photograph next to one of Margaret and me on our wedding day. 2 moments that shaped my life in profound ways. One a beginning cut short, the other an ending that became a new beginning for someone else. I still get postcards from Eliza occasionally. She's doing well, building a life on her own terms. She ended her last note with a quote that stayed with me. Sometimes the longest journey we take is the one from what others expect of us to what we know is right for ourselves. That's the thing about roads. They can take you thousands of miles across continents, but the most important distances we travel are measured in courage, not miles. So if you're ever driving down Route 66 through the Arizona desert and you see something unexpected on the side of the road, consider stopping. You never know, that brief detour might change the course of someone's life, or your own.